Hi, and welcome to Conductor, where we are two sisters on a mission to amplify women's voices on the podium.
Join us as we interview leaders in the field of choral music, share resources, and build a community for current and future teacher conductors, all while exploring the gender divide. I'm Kira Starr.
And I'm McKenna Stenson. And we are Conductor. Hi, Conductor fans. We just want to give a heads up that this episode contains some explicit verbiage. If you have young listeners around, put in some headphones. Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Conductor. We are so excited to have Dr. Sandra Snow on the podcast with us today. Thank you so much for being here.
I'm delighted to be here.
Incredible. Here is just a little bit about Dr. Snow's professional background. As a conductor, pedagogue, and scholar, Sandra Snow is widely acknowledged as one who brings singers of all ages and abilities to artful performance through an understanding of the music and its context in the world around them. Dr. Snow is Director of Choral Programs and Area Chair of Conducting at the Michigan State University College of Music, where she oversees graduate programs in choral conducting. The Mosaic Ensemble has appeared as featured performers at American Choral Directors Association conventions at state, regional, and national levels. As guest conductor, she travels extensively in North America and abroad.
In 2017, Snow created Mirabai, a project-based professional women's chorus. Mirabai recorded ecstatic songs, and they were the winner of the American Prize in Choral Music Professional Choirs Division in 2020. Their second recording, Home and Me, was released in fall 2022. The mission of Mirabai includes outreach and education programs designed to support the work of women as educators, composers, poets, and conductors. And side note here, you'll hear in our ads about the collaboration between Mirabai and the Denver Women's Chorus. So keep your ears out for that as we go today. Snow is a recipient of the Michigan State University William J. Beal Award for Outstanding Faculty, the MSU Teacher Scholar Award, and the Dortha J. and John D. Withrow Award for Excellence in Teaching. Welcome again, Dr. Snow.
Well, thanks for having me.
We are so thrilled to have you here today. And we start our podcast off with the same three questions for all of our guests, Dr. Snow. And the first one is, would you just please tell us a little bit about your upbringing and how you came to choral music?
I'd love to share that. I was actually the daughter of a military family. So my sister and I moved around a lot. My dad was a fighter pilot. And so if you can picture a map of the United States in your head, he was in all the fair weather states on the bottom. So Georgia, Florida, Texas, Alabama, Mississippi, Texas twice, actually, England once. So it was a lot of moving around. And I joined choir, as a lot of us did, in elementary school in the 5th grade. And I was immediately hooked. In fact, I remember the very first choral performance where we dressed up. We went to the mall and we sang things like Jingle Bell Swing, and I felt so fancy.
Oh, that's incredible. We're all picturing a tiny Dr. Snow singing at the local mall.
It was great. I was hooked. But choir for me became then the way that I coped with all of the upheaval and constant change of location in school and, of course, friend groups, because immediately I could walk in a choir room and find a friend group. And I think that communal aspect of what we do in choral singing this is true for many, many people. It's the motivation for doing the thing in the first place.
That makes so much sense, because I think the reason that we keep coming back to choral music is that community aspect. And I just, as I ruminate through this career, I feel like that's always where I turn to, like, oh, something didn't go well today, but do the people love being there? Let's check the temperature. Okay, what do we need to do? Let's keep the community thriving. So you had this adventure growing up, traveling to all these different places, and being a part of different communities. But what events or a series of events were inspirational for you to choose choral music as your career? How did you know that this was your livelihood?
I think, like a lot of musicians, I always knew that music was going to be for me. What I didn't know was that conducting was in my future. I started taking piano lessons when I was 5, and then, of course, was involved in choir all along the way. And I knew I wanted to, at least I thought I wanted to teach. So I became a music ed major, and what I discovered was that I had an awful, really significant issue with performance anxiety. So anytime I had to do a jury or sing for a recital hour or do something by myself, that was a significant challenge for me. And almost thought about leaving music actually and doing my other love, which is writing. Because if I hadn't have been a musician, I would have been a journalist, I think. But then I took conducting class. It was part of our requirements in the third year, like, most music ed curriculum. And I realized almost instantly that my nervous system just dropped off and normalized, and I didn't have that issue. And I think it's the same reason that, being a part of a choir, the feeling of doing something larger than yourself and doing it with other people, I was able to bypass that performance anxiety. And I thought, oh, this is something maybe I could do.
Oh, I love that so much, Dr. Snow. I think a lot of us can relate to that feeling of being in those juries in undergrad and just being petrified. And I remember I was such a diligent student. I practiced every hour, every day, and like no amount of practice ever alleviated the feeling of anxiety singing in front of my professors. It was just so stressful. And then likewise, I feel like a lot of us experience this just energy prior to getting on the podium. Sometimes it's nervous. Sometimes it's just a buildup of all the feelings and the work that you've done. And then as soon as you're there with that group of people, I just feel so relaxed. Like it just feels natural and right. And I think that a lot of our listeners are going to relate to that feeling because of the community, because of the people who you are with. It doesn't feel like a test or something stressful. It just is you recognizing, I get to do this and I get to be with these people in front of me. So I love that you said that.
Such a privilege to be in that position, and the trust that has to happen, that the relationships that get built between the singers. And I think of more and more these days, I think of that space between what the choral singer is bringing and what the conductor is doing is a playground, this beautiful sonic playground where we get to in real time make adaptations and changes from things that we did in rehearsal. And the only way that we can do that is when we have this established connection and feeling of mutual respect for one another. And so, yeah, it quickly made me understand that it wasn't about me. And performance anxiety is kind of about me and my own issues. And so that was a revelation for me, that I could function in that way and still do the thing that I love the most without the fear dominating the experience.
And I'll just add here that similar to you both, I think I felt that, but it was only with the kind and consistent support of my mentor teacher who was leading that course, that I think I was able to slowly realize over time that natural feeling would be something to lean into, because I was a performance major and a music education major, and did not want to be like my mom, who was a teacher. I wanted to go in a different direction and have a different identity. And Christina McMullen, your former student, on my evals would just say, "Oh, you seem so natural. This seems like such an organic fit." So if you're out there and you're still struggling to find that or to lean into that feeling, just know that it's okay to not know right away, but just keep maybe putting things in the sieve and see what comes out, and where you feel comfortable. So just another thought that came to mind this morning.
I think it's why I love the teaching of conducting as much as I do, because, one of the things I think that young teachers are concerned about is that they either look like somebody else, or that they leave their basic personality in order to become something that is not themselves. And I just want to say to young conductors that teachers come in all shapes and sizes, and not everybody has to be charismatic. There's many powerful teachers that I've had that were quiet and would probably identify as an introvert, but you learn the skills that you need in front of a classroom. And eventually, if you wait long enough, your actual self integrates into your practice and it becomes something that is truly fully you. But teaching on the early side sometimes doesn't feel very much like it's, we're trying to understand how people learn, and we have all the noise in our head about how to do it. But I love teaching of conducting because it's a great way to hold up a mirror in front of a student and say, look at you and look what you can accomplish.
I love that so much, Dr. Snow. Yes, I think a lot of people probably, like myself, I had conducting in undergrad, and it was not my moment of deciding I want to be a choral conductor. It did not occur in that space. Not because my professor wasn't wonderful, but just I think so much of it is a comfort with yourself and a matter of experience. And I think the community building is such a huge part of it. As soon as I had my own high school program and was able to create a space where not only the students felt safe to take risks, but I felt safe to take risks, that was pivotal. And I was like, oh, I love this and feel comfortable here because of the environment. And if you're in a judgmental place or a place of, just not a space where you feel safe to be yourself, I think that is crucial. So I love that that's something that you are prioritizing and encouraging.
And now, a quick word from our sponsors. This season, we are featuring a fierce lineup of women composers found in the Music Spoke marketplace. At Music Spoke, composers receive the majority of the proceeds from sales, retain control over their own works, and all scores are available immediately as digital downloads. At Music Spoke, they do not simply publish pieces of music. They find composers and give them the tools and freedom to promote themselves.
United States versus Susan B. Anthony took place in June of 1873 and lasted 2 days.
You just heard Suffrage Cantata by Andrea Ramsey. Check out her works today on musicspoke.com and conducther.com/sponsors. And we're back.
We talked a little bit about your childhood and growing up, moving around to all these places, and you taking piano lessons and having that moment of, oh, I love conducting. And we were wondering if you could talk a little bit about some of the people or maybe a specific event that was influential in terms of you getting to this point. So maybe some of the mentors you had or anyone else you'd like to mention.
I've had the blessing really of having really important mentors who have been supportive of me, not only in my early practice, but continue to be supportive. And I think the idea of mentoring is so critical, especially for women in the field. So the very first woman that I sang for was Hillary Appelstadt. I was at the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. This is before she went to the Ohio State and then eventually University of Toronto. And I can tell you that it was powerful in ways that I couldn't even articulate at the time. To see her doing that work, and also to just understand that her approach to doing the work felt different for me. And it would be years later before I could start to really articulate what that meant. And I do think that there are the ways that women work and think can feel substantially different. And it's not a good thing or a bad thing, but it is a thing. And so for her to model that for me so early was really pivotal for me. And then also to say that she gave me opportunities as an undergraduate um, to be in front of a choir, and I accompanied the group, not super well, but it's to the best of my ability at the time, and that was, I could see that, okay, I there is a path for conducting for women, because I had never seen a woman conduct in real life, and the only people that I knew of that were conductors were men, and often in front of orchestras. So that was my early influence there. In the summertime after my junior year, I went to my first CME Institute for Choral Teacher Education that Doreen Rao founded. And that was absolutely life-changing for me. I knew it in the first session when I watched her work with the Glen Ellen Children's Chorus. And what she modeled for me was this deep belief that children had the potential for artistry just as much as human adults did, and that they were capable of musical thinking and decision making. And she also modeled a way of collaboration that I had. It was just a joyful thing to experience, so that everybody who was in the choir was a part of shaping and crafting the music at hand. And while she was teaching them skills, she was also inviting them to contribute their ideas. And that was a powerful philosophical moment for me. She went on to be my primary mentor, somebody that I still rely on, and also someone who was, generationally important, doing work as a woman in the field, being the head of a graduate program of choral music at a time when you could count on one hand the number of women who were in that kind of position. All of these things are ways for me to see myself into what it is that I do now.
That's so powerful, Dr. Snow. I know Doreen Rao has been just hugely influential for a lot of people, and same for Hillary Appleschott, who we had on our first season of this podcast. And she is just incredible. And just know that you are that person for so many people. So you've not only given credit to your mentors, but you continue to be that person today. And so many people that we've had on this podcast and who reach out to us mention you in the same way that you just lifted them up. So just know that you are also that person.
Thanks. I think one of the most beautiful things about the mentoring process is that you can pay it forward, and to stay intentionally grateful for the privilege that I've had, and then to know that if I can do that for another person, that's where the reward of mentoring is.
Absolutely.
I was like frantically typing that down as you spoke it, because I was like, this is such a good quote. We're keeping tabs as we go. So Dr. Snow, we're going to move into sort of the main portion of our interview, and we're really excited to celebrate the fact that you have moved into the position of Director of Choral Activities at Michigan State. Congratulations. What has your experience been like as a professor over time, specifically from the lens of being a woman in the field? And how have you seen this change maybe over the course of your time in academia? Because you mentioned earlier, there was a time where we could maybe count on one hand the number of women that we were seeing in the field, which we know has increased. But we'd like to know your perspective over your span at Michigan State and maybe even prior to.
Well, I mean, in terms of the profession, let's be real, we are still underrepresented, especially the research tells us, especially in the rank of professor, so that there's a significant drop off of promotion between associate professor and professor. And you can imagine there are a lot of reasons for that. One is that women are also often raising families at the same time, and so you lose opportunities to stay relevant, and that's a concern for some people. And then just, I think even beyond that, there's still that threshold of leadership, and so that's why I think it's very exciting that we're seeing more women now. But if you look at it numerically, in terms of the terminal degree, a DMA degree, we still have very few women who are leading programs. And that's important because the terminal degree are the places that are preparing the next generation of leaders in the field. And so I think this is a place we still have a lot of work to do. I think over time, I would say that the sexism that I might have experienced early in my career has improved, and that I always held the position that I was going to do my work and I was going to do my best work, and I was not going to be discouraged by moments that didn't hold a space for me that was healthy. But I think that I can still point to, institutional ways that women's work continues to be, demanded by the institution. For example, because women are underrepresented on committees, we get asked to do committee work all the time. I can see you nod your head because you know exactly what that's like. And so at the full professor level, because there are fewer women there, that becomes even more acute, which is not something I was prepared for, actually. I thought I was going to attain the rank of full professor, and then you've made it. Well, actually, you're still working a lot. So there are institutional ways that these things still require us to work in different ways than sometimes our male colleagues have to. But I think in general, the climate has improved over time. I think that a place that I'd like to see us continue to grow is to acknowledge that the way that women work and collaborate has a place in an institution that is vital and important, and that we're still trying to dismantle a hierarchical approach to the way that we do all the things, our teaching, our research and scholarship. And so I think women's ways of being in the world actually has a lot to offer, something like academia, because we put a premium, for example, on collaboration. It's the way many women that I know prefer to work. This idea of sharing knowledge and not hiding it under your own little research scholarly bundle. I don't know what word to use there. The way that we value community, the way that we think of pedagogy often as collaborative with students. All of these things are important, and I'm excited because I believe that the next generation, that's you, next generation of conductor teachers are really going to be able to make a shift in this paradigm for the better.
There's so much in that, Dr. Snow, that you just shared. Just so many directions that we could go. But I think one thing that you said that was really powerful was about acknowledging the way that women work and collaborate, and that is vital and important. And we have a new faculty member at KU, and a new woman faculty member on our team, and we got to have lunch on Friday. And I remember texting my women mentors who I used to see go off and have lunch and collaborate. And then all of a sudden, 6 weeks later, some sort of like brilliant project would emerge. And I texted them and said, I think I found my person. And they were like, hold on to it because it's so important. But I've been in this specific position for a year and almost a semester now. And I think that was one of the first times that I was able to sit down with a colleague like that and really have that sort of collaborative sharing of ideas. And I left feeling so empowered and heard, and like it was a true exchange. And so when you said that today, it really resonated with me. And I'd say, if you don't have it yet, hold on and seek it out, even if it's not at your institution, because these calls that Kira and I get to do are the same, like filling of that cup, an opportunity for sharing.
I just was going to say, I also think that mentoring outside of our profession is equally important. Finding women that are doing work that you admire and reaching out in those kinds of ways, because there are just so many skills that women have in business and philanthropy and politics, in lots of places that we can learn from and benefit from.
That's such good advice, Dr. Snow. I don't think anyone's ever said that on the podcast before, but yeah, that's excellent. I have so many incredible women friends who, you know, are great business people, and I admire them greatly, and they are not musicians, and there's so much we can learn, and so many things that are the same that we experience in our fields in terms of both the positive and the negative sometimes. And so it can be really refreshing to step outside of academia, to step outside of the music world, and to take a breath and to converse with people. I just had a phone call yesterday with one of my best friends, and she is in her 50s. She has 2 children who are in her 20s, and she worked at my high school as an administrative assistant. And she's just the most wonderful person. And I think developing those relationships that are outside of your scope can be so refreshing and give you the perspective to say, okay, this is a small thing. It could be so much bigger. Or, you know what, this is a big thing and I need to talk about it with someone. And it's so important to have those people there. So I love that you pointed that out. And I also think everything you spoke to is hopefully a reminder for our male colleagues that it's so important to be supportive of the women who are around you. And I've seen that in my own cohort. I've already had friends who have come to my presentations and, you know, really like gone the extra mile to be supportive of me. And that means so much, even though they are not women. So I think just taking the opportunity to be kind to each other and collaborative and celebrate each other instead of having the scarcity mindset.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly, Kira. I think that having male allies is really important, and also being an ally. And there are many men who have been supportive of my work, especially my husband, who's also a conductor teacher. And that's been really tremendous over the course of years to have that in place and to know that I can trust it.
It's funny you mentioned that, Dr. Snow, because that was a question we were going to ask you. Would you mind telling us about your experience being married to another choral conductor and what that relationship looks like, and just maybe how it has influenced you in your career?
That's a big question. So this is funny. So our offices are on the same hallway. And when I moved into this new position, I got a little bit larger office so I could have an actual grand piano to teach conducting lessons. But now my office is literally next door. So we see each other at work and we see each other at home. And yeah, I mean, I think there are challenges and also great rewards. I've never had to be concerned that my husband, Jonathan Reed, was going to not understand why I had to be out at night for this performance or that thing. I mean, he understands because it's his life also. And I think what we have been able to achieve is, one of us taking on more than the other whenever one of us is really, really busy at work. So when we were raising children, there would just be times when dad was with them and more present than mom was, and the opposite was true as well. And for us, that was a really good solution to how we managed the situation and how we created a little, it wasn't really balance for us, but it was for our kids because they always or generally had a parent around. And so that was a way I think we navigated that. But yeah, and then professionally, it could not have worked if Jonathan was not at the basic in his heart, utterly supportive of what I do and me of his work, and I think that has allowed, what has been, our trajectories are different, our interests are different, but we both value each other so much that those things have worked fairly well, and then there are times that it is complicated. I'm not going to pretend that it's not, but I wouldn't have it any other way.
And now, a quick word from our sponsors.
Pavon Publishing is proud to feature outstanding women composers and conductors.
Composer Judith Harrington has created a prolific choral series for youth and treble choirs that includes Fireflies from Japan and Duérmete mi corazón from Brazil.
Shirley McRae has many outstanding arrangements for young choirs, including popular songs like Black Sheep, and Sakura.
Conductor Iris Levine maintains a treble chorus series of medium to advanced works with text by poets from Teasdale to Yeats.
Other composers and authors in the Pavon family circle include Zenaida Stewart-Robles, Catherine Rundis, and Martha Wall. Explore all of these fantastic composers at Pavon Publishing. And we're back.
Oh, that was beautiful, Dr. Snow. I feel like McKenna can relate to a lot of what you just said.
Yeah, there were a lot of thoughts, and you sort of really beautifully started to segue into another question that, when we have women on the podcast, not always are they also wearing the hat of mother, and so that's something that is this timing question is really more meaningful to me now than ever because my husband and I are expecting a baby in May, so we are. We are entering a new season. And so when I used to ask this question, I was thinking really logistically. And now having gone through the process of, we're in our second trimester and we've gone through the process of the anxiety of like, are we going to make it through the first trimester? And will we even conceive? And like, sorry, Brian, we're talking about it. But it's just, I used to think like, I totally will have control over this. And now I realize the actual like, little controlled, my type A brain was like, I will be able to like, we can pinpoint it. It's going to work out. And that's a lie. But we are wondering if you might
It was really funny.
You're not going to let me off of this hook, are you? Yeah, it was pretty funny. It was a nice idea. But we were wondering if you can talk about timing, specifically related to women, and concepts of the next steps for women. So whether that's looking to return to school for a degree in higher education, or also related to sort of that family planning or what you mentioned, the balance or unbalance of what it is to be mom while also being choral director, because that role is pretty intense.
McKenna, congratulations. I did not know, and I'm so excited for you and Brian. That's just really great.
Thank you.
I get asked the question of timing is invariably going to come from the women who walk in my studio, that we're going to have that conversation at some point. Not all of them plan on having families, but some really want to think about doing that. And I do think that we make women overly fearful about this issue. Right. And so while there are some pragmatic things to think about in terms of timing, I also think that you should live your life. You should live your best life. And if those things converge, then you're going to figure it out. Just like any other thing that comes up in your life that you're not expecting, you're going to find your way through it. Having said that, I think, if you could be like McKenna and plan it beautifully and perfectly, which I'm laughing not at you, I'm laughing with all the women who think this is the case. I do think, finishing, I know a couple of women who have actually gotten pregnant during years 2 or 3 of the doctorate. And those women have their children on the early side and then go on and pursue the tenure thing down the line. I know women like me delayed having children until I didn't have my first child until 35, and I had my second at 38. So, and that was not because it was because I wasn't in the relationship with my husband yet. It was not because I was thinking about a calendar. Okay. And then I was fortunate to be able to get pregnant at the time that was right for us. But again, I would just encourage women not to tie themselves up in knots in anxiety over this. I think the most important thing is the financial piece, and you'll hear the old sage wisdom, about having a baby. You're never going to be financially ready to have a baby. I mean, and what you think is going to be what you need to do this. And so I think there's some truth to that. But there is a reality to it too. I mean, if you take an assistant professor job right out of a doctoral program that's paying less than you were making as a public school teacher, which is the case for so many, that's some lean time. And so it depends on, your partner or whatever the situation is. But, have your family when you want to have your family.
Sage wisdom, Dr. Snow, sage wisdom. And for those of you who think you can be in any control of it, you're not anyway. So, but I think that's such good advice about just living your life. And anxiety is real in all the different facets. So just trying to maybe work through that in the ways that we already know how to do. And by asking for advice and asking for help and learning to accept help. That's something I'm going to continue to work on.
There are some ways I think that women can be strategic. Okay, so one thing that I realized really early on was that, I'm from the South and Jonathan's from the East Coast. And so therefore, no family around, no grandparents regularly able to drop the kids off with. And so, strategically, if you're looking at the job market, you might think about your geography more than I didn't think about it at all. Right. So surrounding, in other words, building in ways of support so that you can manage all of it. One of the things that was an unanticipated and wonderful delight was that we had a built-in group of babysitters right there in our undergraduate music ed population, particularly because we already know they like kids. We never had to really stress about babysitters because we knew these students really well. And so that became our community. And our kids still have contact with some of those people today. And one in particular, our lovely Marta, really was a nanny for the kids in the years in which they needed somebody there more often. And I think, that's another way to strategize building a community that can help uplift you when you really need it.
That's great advice. I've heard Dr. Quist say very similar things. She was like, I think I funded the undergraduate education of one student in babysitting. But I mean, that's true for everyone. Look for those students who are going to be with you in your life in new and exciting ways forever, right? I mean, even if you don't have children, forge those bonds and look for those people who are like, oh, this is something really special here. And we need to hold on to this. And I want to be there for you. And we can create a symbiotic relationship where I'm your mentor and we can also have a coffee and talk about how life is hard. So I think that's something that's super important for everyone to hear. And a good reminder that our undergraduate population is wonderful and capable of so many things, including babysitting.
Well, I'm glad you brought that point up, Kira. I think we also have to be really careful that we don't communicate a message to women that they are supposed to have all of these things. I mean, we just need to accept women's choices, whatever they are.
Put that on a t-shirt, everyone. Probably already exists.
And now, a quick word from our sponsors.
Hey everyone, Gloria here from Call Time Clothing, back again to remind you to check out our newest special edition items from our collaboration with Conductor. Grab a super soft tee for yourself, a family member, a teacher, or maybe all of the above. We've truly got something for everyone. Head over to Call Time Clothing today.
And we're back.
Dr. Snow, thank you for all of your honesty and just vulnerability and sharing everything about your relationship with your husband and having children. And I think a lot of our listeners are really going to appreciate everything that you've said so far. And to kind of change directions a little bit, we would love to hear about Mirabai. And we would love for you to talk about maybe why you started the ensemble and why a treble ensemble. So do you mind telling us why you started Mirabai and why you decided to make it a treble ensemble?
So originally, I looked around and thought, oh my gosh, there's so many fantastic professional choirs, but they're all mixed voices. Where are the treble groups? And of course, there are the groups that I admire and just think so much of, such as the Lorelei Ensemble, with Beth Willers, incredible work, but also not a great representation. So that really is the why. And the mission of the organization is to uplift and amplify the voices of women, whether they're teachers or conductors or poets or singers or learners. And so that's been the sort of central thread. But I will tell you that what I thought the group was going to be and what it actually is are two different things. I really was thinking in the very beginning about equalizing the field in terms of this representation of women's music and women performers. And while that remains a core aspect of what the group is, what it really is an incubator of connection of these powerful women doing work in their own communities. And the coming together through just our projects, that the kind of energy that we get from one another, the conversations like we were talking about earlier, McKenna, this new colleague of yours, and how you felt and felt seen. I think this is a place where we come together and that happens for us. And then we go back into our own communities and we're energized and renewed and we have new ideas. And I have found that to be absolutely the most powerful thing about this ensemble. And also, structurally, I learned it takes a lot of resources, a lot of resources to develop something like this. And as somebody with a full-time job plus, having it develop into a nonprofit that, had its own board of directors, et cetera, that structure that we know about community groups, at least at this point in time, it was just not possible. So we really sort of pivoted to this idea of project-based work, which is where we are right now. And though I'd love to see them more than I do, it's the reality of what we have to be as a structure.
Well, I can tell you from the educator side of things, so much of the repertoire that Mirabai has recorded and put out into the field, I think is accessible to a lot of different demographics of choral communities. And so to have these exceptional recordings as a resource to share with secondary and collegiate treble singers has been invaluable. Because like you said, there's Lorelei Ensemble and some other exceptional professional groups out there that highlight women's voices, but there's definitely not enough. And as we know, that representation needs to continue to increase. And then can you speak a little bit more about the collaborative project ideas and how Mirabai is not just engaging with each other, but with other choral communities? The Denver Women's Project is one. I know that Mirabai has collaborated with CME a bit in the past. So how did those maybe come into fruition, and what has the impact been in terms of mentorship?
The collaborations have organically grown out of the group because these women are doing work all over the country. So the Denver Project, for example, is a result of Cleland Chapin taking this new position in the area, and she's the conductor of the Denver Women's Chorus, which is a gala affiliated group. And so she had the idea, what if we were to try to bring these two communities together? And she had such a well-defined vision for what that could be. It was like, absolutely, we're going to do this. And so the focus of that weekend is really mostly is to put in conversation the work of the Gala Choruses, which is a tremendous organization and has had so much impact, and sometimes is invisible to those of us who are not directly involved in their work. But we have a great need to understand how, as choral conductors, that we uplift the experiences of our LGBTQ community. Everything from how we accommodate trans singers and voices to conversations just about texts that heteronormative texts that dominate our repertoire. And there's much that we can learn from one another. And so those are the kinds of collaborations I think that we're really interested in, things that have immediate impact for teachers in the field.
And I think as a young educator, that has been so meaningful. And then watching the project-based expansion of Mirabai and knowing, hopefully one day in our post-COVID world, that mentorship relationship through the CME workshop, where you can sort of pair up young women in the field with these women mentors, and that impact for the Denver community to have you all there. And again, that it moves directly back into the classroom. That is something that I think is really rare in these project-based ensembles and is something to really celebrate. And so if you don't know about this collaboration, go to our website. The information is there. And it's not too late to sign up for the Denver experience.
And now, a quick word from our sponsors.
Hello, this is Sandra Snow, Director of Choral Programs at Michigan State University and Artistic Director of Mirabai. Mirabai is partnering with the Denver Women's Chorus to present Storytellers, a workshop unlike any conference you've been to. For the first time, leaders in choral music education will partner with members of GALA, the Gay and Lesbian Association of Choruses, to bring a workshop that blends the experiences of musical activists and classroom trailblazers. The Storytellers Conference is designed to improve your rehearsal and ensemble leadership through sessions that promote inclusive pedagogy, cultural responsiveness, and a new lens through which to view the conductor's role. Featured guests will include composer and singer Moira Smiley, and all attendees will be able to see Mirabai in concert. Session presenters will include collegiate educators from across the country and gala chorus leaders who are working as community activists. When we come together to listen to one another's stories, we all grow. Storytellers. Listen, connect, expand. To register, see storytellersdenver.org.
And we're back.
Thanks, McKenna.
Absolutely. Just a quick advertisement. We love it. One thing, Dr. Snow, that I love that it's kind of been a through line in what you've said today is that when you've seen something that needed to happen, you've just kind of done it. I feel like you are an action taker and someone who you're like, oh, well, that's interesting. So let's go ahead and just explore that. And I think that mindset of maybe this doesn't exist, or maybe this exists in a way that is not fulfilling the needs of everyone around. I think that that's something that we can all hopefully embody in our own work and say, how can I as an individual connect with the people that I know and make things better? And if we're all able to do that a little bit more, I think that the choral community at large is going to just continue to benefit and to grow and to have conversations that need to be had and can be hard. So I just want to applaud you for doing all of those things and continuing to be a change maker in the field.
Thanks. I think about this a lot. And in fact, one of the changes that I'm making in the program here at our university is for us to look at what we count as scholarship. So, for example, the kind of projects that this Denver collaboration would be an example of something that would be awesome for a doctoral student to take on, some kind of community outreach that has real impact in a community in a mutually beneficial way. Why don't we call that scholarship? So I think there are ways that we can think about engaging in our communities around us that that structurally will, quote, count, that makes someone's career advance. And it doesn't have to be something that's apart from the other work that we do.
That is excellent. Yeah, I mean, doctoral students are stretched so thin trying to kind of fit into the confines of academia, and there's a lot of red tape and a lot of steps that you absolutely have to complete by X time. And so I think that continuing to expand our concept of scholarship and our concept of research even is invaluable. And McKenna and I have seen that just in the podcast alone. I mean, I've had professors be like, oh, well, you're already doing it, so document it. And I'm like, oh, you're right. So I love that. You spoke a little bit, Dr. Snow, earlier in one of our first questions about maybe some of the sexism that you faced early on in your career, and thankfully, like the lessening a little bit as you've gone through. And we were wondering if you could expand upon that and share a time when you may have faced discrimination and share some suggestions that you might have for others who are trying to overcome this type of adversity.
That's a big question, Kara. Really is.
An easy one.
I've had to create little pots that I can put some of these experiences in. So I've got like a one-off pot, something that happens that someone says or does that's insensitive, but I can view it as something that I can just let go of. It's not systemic. It's not something that happens to me over and over again. That's a different pot. The systemic pot is the hard one, right? Because you can let something go as a one-off, but when you're actually facing internal systemic sexism or any ism, right? That's where the hard work has to be done. I've tried to, over the years, I've gained some wisdom about it. I mean, it's hurtful, and sometimes one can kind of stay in that place of hurt. And it takes charge. It allows, it defines your actions. It makes one reactionary. It makes one defensive. And so through the years, I've had to take a step back and say, okay, first of all, a lot of this is not intentional by the person or the organization or the whatever, but it's just a reflection of a system. And so how do we change the system? So those are, positive steps that one can take. So I've had, opportunities, speaking of committee work, I've chosen committee work that would allow me to make some structural changes. I volunteer to be on a diversity committee or to volunteer to be on a promotion tenure committee. I sit on the university, not the College of Music, but the university committee that is the final gatekeeper for a decision that's going to affect someone's life forever. And so I'm unapologetic at this point in my life about calling it out if I think that a decision they may be unaware of assumptions that they're making about the women, or they may be using language that is not language that they would use to describe a male colleague. And so I have gained enough credibility because I've been in the business for so long, and I'm at the rank that I am, that I can say things now that I couldn't say as a young junior professor. So it's an evolution over the course of a lifetime, and it isn't perfect. And I can think of one time, I could tell you one story early on where In hindsight, I probably could think of 30 things that I should have said, but I didn't say anything because I was so surprised by the situation and so like breathless. I couldn't even get my breath. And I still to this day regret that I didn't have anything to say, but I did a master class. This was my first one, a conducting master class in a summer situation with a choir. I won't name them, but they're a famous professional choir. And this would have been in the late 1980s. Okay, so we're going back a long way. And I had a really difficult written piece to prepare. I spent a lot of time on it, as you can imagine. And I was second. The first person who went before me was a man. And I was second. And I got up on the podium and I noticed there was like motion and movement. And I looked around, and in the back of the room, the tenor basses, many of them, physically slouched in the chair, crossed their legs. And I was, at that point, I was done. I don't even know if I got through the whole piece because I don't remember any of the music making. I was just so shocked by what happened. And one of the altos, actually, from that ensemble pulled me aside and said, okay, you need to know why that happened. I'm like, please tell me. She said, firstly, no one in this ensemble has ever sung for a woman. Secondly, you need to check how you're dressed. And I'm like, what? And I'm looking down at myself. I had on a long skirt. It went all the way to my ankles. I had on a blouse that went, covered all of everything, and I had a long sleeve jacket. There was nothing inappropriate about what I was wearing. And I said, I'm sorry, I don't understand. And she says, my dear, you need to wear gray or black or you won't be taken seriously. I had on a fuchsia jacket. I know, but that was see how far we've come? I don't think I ever wore a skirt again. I was a pants only kind of conductor after that experience. But, that was a situation where I should have called that out when it was happening. I should have said, at least, gentlemen, could you sit up? But I didn't. I was young and I was completely gobsmacked by what was happening.
So I'm listening to another podcast these days, and they have a segment, and this is going to put an explicit warning on this, and it's not your fault, it's my fault. But the segment of the podcast is called "Stupid Shit People Say," and it's just like in a variety of different contexts. And I feel like when we ask this question, we always have another thing that we can put into that category. And I think people do not understand the impact that comments have for a lifetime. Like you said, you're a pants person now, and that comment impacted your concept of what it means to look like a woman conductor on the podium. And even though that was in the 80s, we know from Course America stats that in 2021, only 31% of collegiate choral directors are women. That's a stat from 2 years ago. So I think it's important to take this story, and thank you for sharing and your vulnerability in sharing this, because I think we can all learn and we can help our colleagues understand, like you're doing in that promotion and tenure committee, of how to speak up for ourselves and on behalf of others. And even if that just looks like asking questions, which as a junior faculty member, I find is more of what I can do right now than to necessarily make a statement about the verbiage. But I can ask questions like, so why are we saying it that way? Tell me more about, help me understand why you're describing the situation this way, which is, I hope one day to continue to grow, like you said, this evolution, but just finding the ways that in the spaces we can, whether it's tenors and basses, let's sit up and join the rehearsal, whatever that might look like.
Yeah, I think it's strategic, actually, to think about where you are in relationship to your career and how you can engage the spaces that you're in. And I think, McKenna, that's really smart on your part, you can ask questions and they probably haven't been asked before. And so that causes a certain kind of cascade of things, whether or not you can call it out directly, you're still calling it out. And so I think that's really powerful. Speaking of stats, we know from longstanding and, robust research about student evaluations of teaching that they're basically not even valid, because the sexism and racism and all of the things are so bound up. And so I could say I have a colleague who she's just dynamic and brilliant and wonderful. And every single semester on her SIRS forms, they comment on her shoes and how she's dressed. And I'm thinking, students, you are missing the point. This is one of the most exciting professors in our unit, but they feel comfortable commenting on that. And that's 2023.
I was going to say, Dr. Snow, in a very similar vein, first of all, we all still receive comments about how we're dressed all the time. All women everywhere. And I find oftentimes the worst comments are coming from other women. I see that in people that I love very dearly who say comments about other women and the way that their appearance is. And my personal mission in life is to say, stop. It doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if they've gained weight, if they've lost weight, what they're wearing. Just none of these things matter. And I think professionalism is so important. I am dressed professionally every day at school. My male colleagues are not always dressed to the same level. And I never want my appearance to be something that is distracting, but I also want to wear whatever I want. And I want to feel confident. And we just talked about the importance of being yourself, being authentic on the podium, and feeling comfortable. And so if you feel more comfortable in pants, wear the pants. If you feel great in your fuchsia jacket, wear it. I just saw Dr. McMullen was wearing like a floral jacket and teal pants on Instagram. Like, we love it. Wear whatever you want. And now more than ever, question why we are wearing what we're wearing. Why do we wear black? I don't know. It's fine. Wear it if you want to. But I think just a reminder to all the women out there that our bodies change significantly throughout our lives. And the way that I looked when I was 18 is very different than the way that I look today at 28. And I'm sure is very different than the way I'll look at 38 and then 48. And I hope that people in the audience at whatever concert I am conducting are simply focused on the music. And it's just not that hard. Just pretend I'm a man and you won't need to question it anymore. Oh my gosh. So yes, I'm so glad that you shared that. And to those of you out there who are still experiencing these things, which we know that you are, know that some days you just have to get through it and just breathe it out and know that you're the bigger person. And other days you need to stand up for yourself or tell someone else about it and they can stand up for you. So yes.
And Dr. Snow, you talked
Great
about that
point.
pot, like that little, like maybe that's just a comment that goes in the pot and it goes over here and it goes on the shelf, and you don't need to let that be a part of your psyche anymore. Because I think that's the other component of our field, that it's easy to feel anger and live in the place of really of rage. And so trying to figure out a way to move through that, or to put those things to the side so that you can think clearly and strategically and about what your most authentic self would actually do from your heart versus the place of hurt based on what someone said to you. And I think that's something that we've talked about therapy. We've talked about all sorts of practices on the podcast before, but do what you need to do to find that healthy place.
And now, a quick word from our sponsors.
Hello, everyone. Jocelyn Hagan here. I just wanted to let you know that the Compose Like a Girl podcast has officially launched. Listen as I interview celebrated composers Sarah Kirkland Snyder, Chen Yi, Dale Trombor, Angelica Negron, Rina Esmail, and more. I'm also hard at work on the next batch of scores in the Compose Like a Girl choral series, distributed by Graphite Publishing. You can help me bring these new pieces to life. I'm always seeking choral ambassadors to perform these new works by emerging composers. If you're interested, please reach out to me, Jocelyn Hagan, via my website, jocelynhagan.com, or social media. I look forward to hearing from you.
And we're back. So we have some fast 5 questions for you. These are supposed to be relatively quick. And if they're not quick, it's okay.
I forgot about the fast 5. I thought, how can I possibly prepare for the fast 5? I can't do it.
It's okay. You can't prepare, but you're ready. You've been preparing your whole life. You are so ready. And so we're going to dive in. And the first question we have for you today is, what is a favorite current choral octavo or composer that you'd like to celebrate on the podcast today?
I love the work of Andrea Clearfield, Philadelphia-based composer who is not as well known as some of the other women she's well known certainly in her circles, but in particularly like secondary, early collegiate, there's a lot of music there that is just so beautifully composed. And I'd like for folks to know she's also one of the most imaginative creatives I've ever known. She has this amazing salon in her home in Philly that functions like you might imagine, a 19th century salon sort of an experience, but she's bringing in and connecting people from wildly different musical backgrounds. Talk about an incubator. And I think as a composer, having all of these different people in her home over all these years must also be impactful in her own work. Yeah, she's great. She's a very exciting composer.
Incredible. Everyone check out Andrea Clearfield. Our second question is, what is one misconception about you, Dr. Snow?
That I'm an extrovert. I am nowhere near an extrovert. So all you introverts out there, you can figure out the skills that you need, and I can do it now. I can talk to a group of people. And I enjoy, I love rehearsing and all of that sort of thing. But at the core, I am an introvert. And so a therapist helped me understand this some years ago. And the idea is that introverts have to have space and in order to sort of regroup and regather energy, often being in noisy, loud settings takes a lot out of me, and I have to retreat from that. And then extroverts, of course, feed off of the very thing that introverts need to retreat from. That was a useful distinction for me because it's not necessarily about being quiet versus talkative, or it's more about how your energy is.
And we need more introverts people in our field, because I think, like you said, there's that misconception that you have to be an extrovert to have success. And so we're grateful for you sharing that with us. What is one word to describe you as a teacher conductor?
I guess facilitator.
Ooh, that's a good one. I love when we have a unique one, Dr. Snow. That's great. We're going to make like a map of all the words that we've had, and that's a great one.
It's an inadequate one, but I don't have another one. I can't think of another one to reflect the fact that I want there to be a reciprocal relationship, but it does sound kind of businesslike, facilitator.
No, I like it. It sounds very astute. All right. Our fourth question for you is, what is a favorite choral memory?
Oh, so many. That's really hard. That's like asking, who's your favorite composer? A favorite choral memory. I think I'm thinking about now the very first time I did a choral orchestral work as a singer, new to college, and we did a Mahler 9. I was at Arizona State University at the time, and Doug McEwen was conducting, and he's a legend. If you don't know that name, he was a legend in the field. And he had the most extraordinary wingspan. Like, he was a tall, tall man. And here he is conducting this monstrous work. And I remember thinking, this is powerful and more important than I could have ever imagined. And like, wouldn't world peace be solved if everyone could have an experience like this? So that was a memorable experience.
That's so beautiful. And I think just that combination of so many forces as a young musician to be in that space. I know for so many of our singers, we have a big performance coming up where we do a choral orchestral collab, and people walk away from that changed, never the same. So what an important thing to share. So our last question is the fun one. What is a choral blooper that you might be willing to share with the audience today?
Okay, so I have so many things come to mind. I can think of the fact that I can never be responsible for a choir walking on stage. I have terrible spatial abilities, and I send them on backwards every time. So, my students won't even let me help them get organized. We'll take care of this, Dr. Snow, because there's nothing worse than walking on stage and realizing that they're backwards and you have to adjust your cues and and then personally, this is about Hillary Appelstadt again. I was playing for her and we were doing a divisional conference performance of the Southern Division. And we were doing this, I think it was a Canadian piece, and it was really pianistic. And I was excited and nervous, and it got to the very last chord, and I think it was supposed to be G major, whack. And in my left hand, I played an F natural at the bottom. It was really humiliating. I think that was the last time I ever really played publicly for a choir.
Oh, that's incredible. You just added a little extra special sauce to that final chord, Dr. Snow. The audience special. Didn't know.
Oh, they absolutely did. An infant could have figured that out. And then I mean, you already have to put an explicit rating on this, so maybe I could tell one more story.
Please, we love the bloopers because so many people need them.
I'm just gonna. Okay, let's just put it under the heading that diction is important, right? So the text is magnificent, T-I-N-T-S. Say it aloud, magnificent, T-I-tense. And if you don't say the in the word, yes, it's highly problematic. That's when you go, I missed that in rehearsal, and this is really, I'm hearing it in live performance.
Oh, that's amazing. Dr. Snow, it's important that we share these stories. We started this segment because I once said penis in front of my tenor basses. So, it's really important to share these things because everyone does it. And we all have a moment where we just realize, oh, what we do is so cerebral and out of context sometimes. And then we're like, oh, I forgot that I'm using real words and I'm a person. So
that's great. I love it. I love the segment.
We're just so grateful for your time. And we know that our listeners are going to glean so much wisdom from what you shared today. And like Kira mentioned at the beginning, there's already a wonderful legacy that you have and that you're really pushing others to be the best versions of themselves and to continue the promotion of great work in the field, but especially the lifting up of women's voices. So we're just so grateful for your contributions to the field and glad that our podcast aligns and that you were able to spend some time with us today.
Well, thank you for having me. And I'm so excited about both of your work, and this podcast is contributing a lot. So thanks for what you're doing.
Well, for our listeners, if you haven't seen our social media, please check us out. We are at conduct.her.pod on Instagram and conduct.her on Facebook and TikTok. Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Thank you for listening. This has been Conduct Her.
This episode was engineered and mixed by Mary Hannah Klontz, with intro and outro music by Jonathan Martin and ad music by Kate Krellin.
Discover more resources at conducther.com.